Powerful but Gentle. An Ibogaine Trip Report by CS. Posted to earwid.org February 16th, 2005. I'm recalling this Ibogaine experience after 14 moons. In this time, I've remained opiate free, and now I feel it's the right time to tell my little story. Prior to my experience of Ibogaine, I was a heroin, methadone junkie for over 9 years, and had tried countless times and many different ways to quit. I'd sought Ibogaine for 5 years out of those 9 years of addiction, starting with street rumours about a miracle African root that cures heroin addiction. Eventually, I was directed to a couple of clinics, but the cost was just not realistic enough for a simple street junkie like myself. I did, however, run into someone on the internet that invited me to sit in on an Ibogaine treatment session. I'll recount this because it ends up being a major factor of my Ibogaine experience. My girlfriend and I visited, apparently unbeknownst to the guy receiving the treatment, and the whole experience was nightmarish. The guy giving the treatment had fresh track marks. The guy receiving the treatment didn't look happy and looked sick, tripping fierce at the same time. I saw him 4 days later back on the street hunting down the dope. I left with the impression that it was a scam, that this guy was doing treatments with alleged Ibogaine to get his dope fix. I doubted the potential of Ibogaine concerning my own addiction, and thus gave up my search for this amazing stuff that would one day save my life. And then one morning, a couple of years later, and quite out of the blue, a friend called me and said that he had a friend who was in town, and that he gave out Ibogaine treatments. The timing was good, because I was due to go to Mexico in a couple of weeks, and wasn't looking forward to being sick down there. 2 weeks prior to this, I had attempted a cold turkey kick in the woods because of my up-and-coming departure to Mexico, but this only lasted 2 days. I guess despite what I had seen and felt from my past search in Ibogaine, I was still suspicious that it might work, not to mention desperate. I got a call a few days later and arranged a meeting at a nearby bar with a guy I referred to henceforth as Chris. This guy was right out of a B-grade Mad Max type flick. Mohawked, bones in his ears, dirty clothes, someone who had definitely walked the path more than a few times. He was homeless, living out of his van. I was slightly sceptical, considering his attire and nomadic ways, but he talked good in the way when someone really believes what they're saying. We met many times over the next week, talking over coffee, about Ibogaine, about my past, how big a habit I had, medical history, etc. I was told a reasonable sum of money for the treatment was in order, though in my current financial situation it still seemed somewhat improbable. But we continued to meet, and he continued to encourage me to work up some money. 4 days before my departure date to Mexico, we talked heavily about the money situation. I just didn't have it. I could barely hustle my little 3/4 gram a day habit. I called several people, more or less begging to loan me some money for a miracle route from the African continent. First off, I didn't have the best credit history, and then on top of it, a junkie trying to get a loan for a magic African route, a mildly comical situation to most people. I went to bed that night feeling bummed. Sick in Mexico with the family wouldn't be a pretty story to say the least. But then early the next morning, 3 AM or so, my father left $300 on my table. That next morning I got a call. "Look dude, I know you don't have any money," but I interjected, "Well, I do have money." I got the feeling from that call that he would have done the treatment regardless of my lack of money at the time. It greatly impressed me. Chris came over to my apartment at 4 PM. Strangely, everyone in the apartment had to leave and wouldn't be back until the next evening. He had me write an IOU for the remaining cost. We were ready to go. I had my last fix at 2 PM. We decided at 6 PM that I was sober enough to go ahead with the experiment. At 6:30, I took a test dose of 250 milligrams. At 7:30, I took another 270, and at 8 PM, I took the big gulp at 1000 milligrams. After this, I was somewhat physically and mentally impaired, but managed to take another bitter dose of 300 milligrams down the hatch at 9:30 PM. Then, I laid down into a kind of unrestful sleep or stupor. Let me note that I stretched the truth and told Chris I weighed in at 68 kilograms when I actually weighed 60. Also, let me add that it was after many discussions concerning my past use of hallucinogens and physical and mental health that he decided to go with these doses. I mention the dosage amounts purely for informational purposes. They are by no means a framework to follow for other treatments. I awoke sometime around 11 PM, not feeling all that good, slightly sick, psychedelically disoriented. I started to imagine that I was involved in a scam. My mind created elaborate scenarios of a scam taking place, as well as the people involved, the reasons why, etc. I walked out of my room and confronted Chris, asking if he was a scammer. He replied no, and said it in such a way that I felt he believed in what he was doing. I felt his sincerity, and started questioning my own creative imagination. He said I should take more Ibogaine. I didn't like that idea at all. I already felt like I was tripping hardcore right now, so I decided in my delirium to give it a little more time. I went to the bathroom and puked out the most vile orange stuff I had ever seen in my life. I felt there was a connection to my puke and my addiction, like something was being exorcised from my system. It was an uncanny feeling. Something really was happening. My mind went back and forth from the idea of a scam going down to the idea of a demon being exorcised from our being with a magic African root. I went to my bedroom and laid down. I've realised that something was working. I was starting to feel better. Things got clearer and more lucid. I saw how a part of me that was scared to let go of the addiction was creating elaborate storyboards and acting out amazing plays in an attempt to remain addicted. I was amazed at how my mind could be trying to sabotage itself in this way. I found it slightly humorous and saw the attempt as utterly futile. I encouraged that part of my mind to relax and let go. I had some other interesting visions during this time, but mostly I just recall being inside my mind, seeing trillions of neurons, my whole neural network, the universe that I am. And then I saw that a part of that neural network was highlighted. It was signifying that this is where my addiction was from, but not just heroin, much, much more. And then something in my head said, "Watch this." And slowly the pattern was being extracted, slowly pulled out until it finally disappeared in the distance. I was utterly amazed. I must have awoke shortly after that. In my kitchen was this pink-looking dude watching over me, making sure everything was going smooth. Some dude that I had only met a week earlier. He was frying up some greasy potatoes. I was amazed. I saw a guy who was helping others by helping himself, an urban shaman of sorts, helping those who want help on the same path that he once walked himself. And then, like looking in a mirror, in him I saw myself. I saw that I was helping myself to heal myself through him. I said to him/me aloud, "Thank you for what you're doing, I think it's great." It was truly profound to me, so beautiful. I felt like I'd just come back from a long-lost vacation. I felt proud unto myself, like I was bringing back a treasured gift to the totality of life. I laid there a while longer, amazed that I wasn't sick, that I felt so good to be alive, and I cried softly with much joy in my heart. The words gentle but powerful resonated through my mind the entire time. I stumbled out of my room and into the living room to the amazement of Chris. "What are you doing? You shouldn't be up right now," he exclaimed. "But I feel so good. I feel alive again. I feel the magic. It's been so long since I felt like this." We talked. I saw an old brother like me, from the very beginning of time and space. I was truly amazed. Right here in front of me was my forgotten brother, as ancient as I was. I loaded my bong with some fine herb and puffed. I looked about the room and saw everything as ancient, just as ancient as me. Every atom, every subatomic particle of it all. It was just that some parts had forgotten where they came from, what they were. I ate an apple, and it tasted beautiful. It felt so good not to be alone anymore. I felt utterly connected to every little bit of this cosmos. And then, I felt it. Shit, I saw it. It took me by surprise as well. An ancient wave of consciousness percolating through and from everything, moving through our beautiful planet, our Gaia. It spoke to me, but not in words, beyond words. It spoke from the very core of my being. It said that I have taken a long, hard path, precious beyond imagination, but that I was now done with that path, and it was time to unite upon another one. This consciousness was a multi-consciousness, a uniting of consciousness, if you will. It said the time is now, and that I was a part of this unity, this wave of consciousness. and that I always had been. It was healing, uniting. They were one and the same, really. I'd always struggled with this idea of a super-consciousness, but now it was undeniable. I felt it through every bone in my body. I felt synchronized. I understood it to be an idea that I would not only entertain, but nourish and propagate. By this time, I noticed that Chris had fallen asleep, surely assuming that by my super-ecstatic state that I was alright, and there were no worries of me shedding my clothes and raving mad through the streets. I sat for hours, amazed at the marvel that we call life. And then, soon came dawn. I retired to bed for a while, but didn't get much rest. I was still so intrigued by the wondrous beauty of it all. I relaxed most of the next day. Chris left around 4 p.m, and the other denizens of the house returned around 6. The next evening, I boarded a plane for Mexico. It all seemed so superbly synchronistic. Looking back, Mexico was one of the best things I could have done on top of the Ibogaine. It provided a place away from my normal space and routine, my old patterns. It helped to build new patterns and gave them some time to set in. I'm sure that if I had stayed in my old familiar place, it would have been much more difficult and challenging. So now, 14 moons later, it feels good to write this story. It makes me smile at how truly magical life is with all its ironic synchronicities. Writing my story is also in part a completion of sorts, and I hope an inspiration to others who feel that they're at the end of the road and ready for a new journey. Mucho amor. Additional notes on Ibogaine. Extreme auditory enhancement. I could hear the minutest of sounds over a very large range and perceive them all simultaneously. This lasted approximately 10 to 12 hours. Mild visual enhancement. Vivid colours, more colours, edge detection. A classic tryptamine-induced visual perception of things lasting approximately 10 to 12 hours. Ataxia. I definitely had coordination issues. Walking took some effort, and anything beyond what would have been difficult. This lasted approximately 36 hours. Insomnia. For the following 2 weeks, I slept little. A few hours at most in one stretch, but I felt good despite this, waking up feeling motivated and refreshed each time. Shoutouts. To Noah, Chris, and my pop. To all the others who've let me kick cold turkey in their apartments, houses, tree houses, basements and backyards. To all the girls and guys who still love me, even though I was a selfish junkie who was in love with his dope. And most importantly, but not always so obvious, thank you to the great mystery, for it is you, or us, that made this all possible, and I am eternally grateful. Well, that couldn't have gone better for our kid, could it really? It's a testament to the power of Ibogaine and how it effectively treats addiction, possibly more effectively than majority of psychedelics. Obviously, each psychedelic can make you face your traumas, face your shadow, work through these things like addiction, but Ibogaine really seems to get to the core of it more so than any other psychedelic treatment that there is out there. And obviously, if you've seen in the news lately, clinics and scientists around the world are trying to turn a profit from this plant, which is, it's going to open up a lot of grey areas, I believe, because obviously it's going to be absolutely fantastic that people can treat their addiction in such an efficient manner, but we know what happens when you start to lump profits into anything that has spiritual value. It could go one or two ways. At the end of the day, the only way to truly find out is for them to embrace it, is for the medical world to embrace it. Hopefully they do it in a conscious, loving, empathetical manner, and it's not just all about profit. But at the end of the day, the only way that it's going to come to fruition is through a profit-based motivation. So yeah, I think this is probably the best Ibogaine report I've ever read. It's the top one on Erowid. I really wanted to share this one because it just hammers home all of the positive benefits of using it. Obviously it can be quite a rough experience. There's a lot of purging involved, which has a lot of similarities to ayahuasca, which has also great potential for curing addiction and etc. It's really just fascinating how it can get to the very core of what's going on and sort of strip it down by itself. Even though you will have to face up to it, as you will in any sort of psychedelic ritual, Ibogaine and ayahuasca just seems to do a lot of the heavy load work for you, unlike say other psychedelics where, say, I don't know, you're trying to treat addiction via DMT or LSD. A lot of it will be your individual consciousness itself having to work through it, but with Ibogaine and ayahuasca, it's almost the power of the spirit, if you will, of these chemicals. I'm not saying there is some super fucking like ghost thing inside them that's sorting you out, just a metaphor, isn't it? That seems to chip away at it for you, which makes it a lot easier for addicts who are, say, majorly in denial or have seriously like deep-rooted addictions that they can't fess up to themselves with the help of a psychedelic. Can use these plant medicines to actually take a lot of the weight off for them and iron out all the kinks that they're experiencing in their psyche that are the root cause of these addictions. What's really interesting about Ibogaine therapy is that the majority, or at least a big chunk of these therapy sessions that you undergo, are run solely by people who've just used Ibogaine to get clean in the past and want to help others do the same, like how he refers to in this report as being an urban shaman of sorts. And actually these treatments are generally more affordable than the traditional rehab clinics in the US. Apparently that goes upwards of like $12,000, which is like fucked. And they offer opioid use as another option when rehabilitation and the 12-step programs have failed, and it's oftentimes more effective because it is getting to the root cause of the problem. Like, this just ties in with just why are psychedelics so powerful with treating trauma. I've reiterated this a lot in the past. It's because it's getting to the core, the deep root of where it's coming from, rather than, say, obviously I don't want to demonize antidepressants or people who go through therapy, because it is effective and it does work for a lot of people, but also for the other half of people who have it, it can actually be detrimental or just be completely ineffective. And so for those sort of people, Ibogaine's a fucking godsend, really, innit? So yeah, it really needs to start taking off, and the popularity of Ibogaine treatment over like the past decade or so, it's obviously catching the attention of these researchers, drug developers, and hopefully it gets incorporated more into the sort of depression treatment, anxiety treatment sphere that therapists engage in. But there also will be a lot of backlash, as there always is, from the traditional sort of scientific crowd, where it's like, oh, we shouldn't be using these chemicals. Not saying the majority of people don't think that. I'd say any trustworthy scientist or therapist would be more than game for this. I know a mate who going through therapy, and his therapist is more than game for Ibogaine mushroom treatment for depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses, because why wouldn't you? It's completely proven, and if it works, the thing is, at the end of the day, if it works for your patient, that should be the main thing, really, because why else are you doing this job? Obviously you're trying to make money and it's your career and your life purpose, but the root desire of wanting to do that should be because you want to love people and help them and allow them to grow, because that's more rewarding than any fucking wad of cash, really, isn't it? Well, at least I think so. So yeah, if you've had any experience with Ibogaine, please let me know, and I'll be interested to feature it in the future. But until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.